violence in the U.S. reached its peak in the 1970s, tapering off over the next few decades until recently. Whether it takes place at a protest at the hands of law enforcement, property destruction during a riot, or personal aggression on an individual, political violence has been prevalent within the last decade. Why is this happening now? Why has it gotten so bad, and is it here to stay? Please welcome to the stage Fort Fischer, Joe Walsh, Jon Hersey, and Nick Gillespie to delve into these topics.
Okay, so political violence in the United States, I think, is going to be a really timely discussion as we're beginning this particular year, 2024. So for all three of you, I want to first have you just introduce yourself and define from your perspective, what is the current condition of the United States as it relates to the risk of political violence kind of incoming over the next year?
So I think that the wheels are in motion, and what's going to happen is going to happen largely regardless of what we can do at this point. That might sound pessimistic. Maybe we can play some good cop, bad cop here. But I think we have to be looking long-term, what is the root of the issue, and long-term, how do we solve it? This didn't happen overnight. What really is causing this? Well, political violence almost isn't even political in nature. It's moral. It's moral outrage. And so the question is why? And why do people think that violence is the answer? And I think it's because they, of course, feel helpless to use any other means to address these issues. And where does the moral outrage come from? Well, the left, I think, has largely created a reaction to itself. You know, if you are, they have basically raised the dead of identity politics in this country. And, you know, we're at the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Movement. And for the past 60 years, issues of identity politics and racism have been dying. So there are still racists out there. Racism is evil, but it's, compared to what it was, it's much less of an issue than it's ever been. Yet you have this whole group of people that is demonizing what I'll just broadly call white America. And when you do that persistently, what's going to happen over time is that those who feel attacked morally, those who feel like they are, you know, there's this group that's taking the moral high ground and they're calling them the oppressor. I think over time, those people, even though they don't care to be grouped into some sort of identity group, they coalesce and band together to form a reaction response.
Can I ask a question? I'm Nick Gillespie, by the way, editor-at-large at Reason, but and I brought some stats and stuff, but just to start a conversation or a debate, are you saying that the political left is somehow responsible for January 6th?
So I wouldn't say, look, the left
indirectly,
has
and for the Charlottesville
education.
March,
They've controlled
the violence
education.
that we've been seeing for the most part is clearly coming from the political
Oh,
right.
absolutely. I'm not denying that.
No, but
look,
so where does that come from?
So I'm saying that for 100 years now, the left has been dividing people and dividing people.
Stop. To Nick's point, though, because let's do a quickie. Because
So I will get questions that we're going to get into.
Okay.
Let's
if I may.
get the introduction.
Okay, I'm Nick Gillespie, editor-at-large at Reason. I'm not overly worried about political violence between now and then. I think there's going to be increased property crime, and my fear, there is no systemic attempt to bring down violence, political violence nationally in order to foment political change. That you saw in the 70s with the Weather Underground, you saw with environmentalist movements, animal liberation people, in the 80s with abortion clinic bombers. Like there were systems in place to create chaos. I don't think we're going to see that. I think we might see sporadic stuff happening. The thing that worries me is an American Values survey that was taken last fall found that 1 of 3 people who identified as Republican said violence might be necessary to save the country, 22% of independents, and 13% of Democrats. The other thing that worries me is that 77% of Americans think crime is rising, including violent crime, whereas it has been declining for the past couple of years. And so there's a lot of balls here, and some of them might crash with violence.
Mr. Walsh.
I'll give a super freaking short answer. This country is unbelievably divided, more divided than anybody in this room knows. We are at a point in this country where instead of just disagreeing with people respectfully, people on the other side of the spectrum, we are at a point where too many Americans want to destroy and or kill, figuratively speaking, sometimes not figuratively speaking, people we disagree with. This is dangerous. The right is way further down this road than the left is. The left is on the same road. And unlike my friend, I do worry about violence this year.
Yeah. If I could just throw out one thing. So what you're calling the right is really just an aspect of the left. And they're essentially using the same ideas and the same tactics.
Who identify as the right? It wasn't.
This group here is the right.
Was it Intifada?
Uphold individual rights or the right.
Was it Antifa running into the Capitol building? It was Trump supporters, Republicans. Okay, they're not right. Okay.
Well, the purpose of a political spectrum is to actually get the options on the table so we can see what are our options here. And if the political spectrum is taken up by all these groups that want to systematically violate our rights, then we're not even on the spectrum.
Where do you put MAGA on the spectrum?
They are on the left.
So I think that maybe it might be useful to, rather than talking about some of these terms are a little bit amorphous, we end up, well, the left is a part of the right. We're going to get into some confusing.
This is a psychedelics panel. We're all part of the same thing. Yeah.
So I actually think, Mr. Walsh, you might be the person to help us maybe understand or define some of these terms, right? You entered Congress as sort of on the Tea Party movement. You were a strong, steadfast conservative at a time. You endorsed Trump at the beginning of the Trump era. You voted for Trump. But August of 2023, it seems like you've transformed some along the way. You wrote an article headlined, quote, "Trump is a dangerous criminal who belongs in prison." So a pretty big shift. So the questions that I would ask you are, what did you see as sort of the condition of the country at the time that Trump was coming in that made you feel that that was the right thing, as opposed to what has changed to get to where we are today for you?
I voted for Trump in 2016. The same people who supported him supported me and voted for me. I voted for Trump because I felt like our political system was broken. We needed disruption. I understood the populist anger. I come from kind of a populist background. That anger, by the way, is still with us. Trump and MAGA have taken that on steroids to a place that is scary. But I think that populist anger is still there, again, especially pronounced on the right now.
And so just quick follow-up on that, as we're connecting this to political violence, how would you imprison the leader of the Republican Party without inciting further violence?
Well, he's been indicted 4 times criminally. He'll have his day in court. If he's found guilty of some of these crimes, he'll be convicted and he may end up in jail. I don't think politics should impact that decision at all. Like, I don't think we should not convict Trump because we're worried about what that might lead to, and we certainly shouldn't convict him for political reasons. So that'll play itself out.
For Nick, so you wrote actually in 2021 about the January 6th riot, quote, "The protesters are their own bag of shit, but our leadership was incompetent beyond belief." Do you have any reason to feel like those conditions have changed as we go into 2024?
Oh, yeah.
It seems like emotions are hotter.
They've gotten a lot worse, right? Everything is bigger and more robust and more pronounced. Having said that, I don't, when I said I don't worry about systemic issues, because I don't think there is a secret MAGA underground that is, connecting, we're going to have like 7 explosions at the same time or anything like that. What worries me, and this goes back to left-wing protests, because I think in terms of actual violence, initiating violence as it is commonly understood, that really has been a thing of the right. And they are also much more aggressive in waving guns in people's faces and putting up, Nazi flags and things like that, and I'm not equating MAGA with Nazis. But on the left, what we have seen over the past, really over the past couple of months, but it's intensifying in the wake of the October 7th attacks on Israel, are things like stopping traffic. I live in New York City, and people will block traffic on bridges, and it is a mass protest. And it's not violent in and of itself. I do think it's unlawful. But what happens then is that, you're blocking a bridge with traffic on it, and somebody hits the gas pedal, and then suddenly all hell breaks loose. You're also seeing more environmentalists attack, things like, throwing soup on paintings and gluing yourself to various, parts of the environment. We're seeing more property damage, people pulling down posters of kidnapped Israelis. And it's, that I think is a form of violence, but it's property violence, but then it incites people. So I think if we see political violence coming forward, it's going to be as an epiphenomenon of one of these events. And to bring it back to the government or law enforcement has mostly shown itself to be incompetent or uninterested in quelling chaos by using the right crowd control, tactics and things like that. Your work has shown this again and again. The police either can't control crowds or they choose not to in ways that are dangerous. That's what I worry about.
So we'll certainly circle back to kind of the practicalities of that. But Jon, I do have a question for you that kind of lends to perhaps some of the terms that we were talking about before. I was actually watching your speech from this conference a year ago, and you were talking about kind of a contrast between, rather than using kind of the terms left or right, sort of wokeism on the left and national conservatism on the right, which has been an even bigger subject here. I wonder if you feel that either of these ideologies or both are intrinsically in support of initiatory violence, and whether you feel like there's any way to calm the tension between those ideologies without it kind of breaking.
Yeah, this goes back to the question about terminology. Really, if you look at these, although they have lots of superficial differences, they're variants of exactly the same thing. If you read Yoram Hazony's works, he says Marx was right. Marx was right. Those on the right need to understand that really at the end of the day, we're incapable of sitting back and reasoning about things neutrally. What we need are pressure groups. We need a government that can say, okay, in this geographic sphere, this pressure group gets precedence over that one. And what is the left doing? They're doing exactly the same thing. They are splintering pressure groups further and further on the basis of every conceivable victim mentality. And what they want is not individualism. They want people to identify as some collective, whether it's racial or religious, and that goes for both left and right. So I think that they're variants of exactly the same thing. Both are anti-reason, anti-individualism, and anti-individual rights. And the force element, whether it's inciting outward violence like a riot, or just using the force of government against us to instill, for instance, a religion in a certain geographic area, that's force. And so both of them want to use force against us.
One point I'd make, and I don't know if it's related to anything, and then I'll shush. We can't underestimate how unique Trump is to all of this. If you recall, Donald Trump, months before the 2020 election, began lying about the 2020 election. Remember, telling his voters that one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to win or it's going to be stolen from me. He started to say that months before the election, building up, fomenting that in case he loses, man, his supporters are going to be pissed off, angry, and do something. None of us were surprised that January 6th happened because we heard this stuff building up to January 6th. Need to note, Trump's doing the same damn thing now. Months before the election, he's saying the same thing. He's sowing this violence in case he loses, and that's a unique, scary thing.
So it has broadly been my kind of observation, trying and meeting with and filming activist groups of kind of all perspectives, that on the left, there's a plurality of people who basically view what happened on January 6th and the events surrounding it as a serious coup attempt, an insurrection, right? Something that seriously jeopardized the democracy and the state. On the right, a plurality of people seem to believe that, in essence, the current incumbent president is illegitimate, that he's in the office by fraud. And between the two of them, it seems like there's a degree of sort of cynicism about democracy that I don't think that I've seen before, where more than half of the country seems, for one reason or another, to feel like democracy is broken or kind of on the brink. So I'm interested in hearing, like, all of you have described different views of kind of who the danger is and also kind of the degree of danger. But I'd love to hear from you, like, in the year to come, how much should we really be worried about it? Is the government really in jeopardy? Is democracy really in jeopardy based on violence? We'll start with you, Jon.
To be honest, I don't know that this, it's obvious, this is a historic moment. I want to agree that Trump is a unique component of this. And why is that? Well, he's a master at leveraging the same tactics that the left uses. He's a master at saying, look, you're a victim. You're a victim. You're a victim. Let's band together and we'll take this thing back. I think that this will be a decisive moment in American history. I'm not going to try to forecast how it's going to go. I think fundamentally what needs to change is we need to look out at the world, at all of the people who are buying the propaganda about, look, you are unable to live your own life. You don't have what it takes. You don't have a rational capacity to do that. All of your virtues, your character, your intelligence, that comes from your identity group. What we in the liberty movement need to say is that's absolutely false. You are you. You're a unique, unrepeatable individual. And I think this is one of the beautiful things about all of you here and about SFL in general, is that this is the start of it. If you look back, as 100 years that the left has dominated education, this is not happening overnight. This is at least 100 years in the making. If we're going to change this, it's not going to be this year. It's going to be long term, and this is how we do it. So I want to just congratulate all of you for being here in SFL, for attracting so many intelligent young people to this cause. I think this is actually what matters, not what happens in 2024.
I'm a dark Irishman. I'm worried. To me, right now, America is like a married couple on the brink, and we're in front of the marriage therapist, and we're going to give it one try to see if we can keep it together. And if I'm that marriage therapist, I'm telling the married couple, all right, you got to at least agree on this. Every 2 years we have an election, we all got to agree on who won and lost that election. We're at a point now where this country is not even agreeing to that. And if the people in a democracy can't agree on who won and lost an election, we're done, and that's going to lead to violence.
I'm much more optimistic than that. I'm also an Irishman and dark in my personal beliefs, but not so much in kind of outside of the environment. The fact of the matter is in the midterm elections, the Republicans got their asses kicked, and they showed up for work the next day. The presidential election is different because it's a bigger deal. More is at stake, and Trump is much more of an inciting factor, and he is the nominee. He's going to be the nominee. I think if the Republican side of the equation and anybody who kind of aggregates around that, it's really important that the Republican leadership, they can support Trump, but they really need to push back against any kind of calls to violence. I think more broadly, and this is something that people in the liberty movement or the libertarian movement can do, is push back against the millenarianism of this moment. This is not the apocalypse. The spaceship isn't coming, Jesus isn't returning, Ragnarok isn't starting. Okay, this is another election. We're at the end of a long cycle of exhaustion, and in 5 years or in 10 years, we'll be living in a radically different America because, the old joke is that social progress is one funeral at a time. Trump, Biden, they're going to die of natural causes. So are many of the institutions, the arrangements, the mindsets that we have right now. And something new is coming. We don't know what that is yet. We need to be fighting so that when that change is evident, the first thing people see are libertarian ideas of free minds and free markets, of individual autonomy, respect, dignity. I think that we all agree on. Having said that, going between now and then, I think it is up to the leadership of both parties. The thing that worries me more than anything, is that the Democrats are having their convention in Chicago again, which led to a melee unlike any other seen in the past 100 years in American politics. I hope they have that locked down and they have their process. They took their losses pretty well from an official point of view. I think it's up to the Republicans to do that. Most of the MAGA followers are not violent. Virtually none of them is. But we need to make sure that people understand that violence is not allowed in this election or in other elections.
I mean, what would it take to actually prevent that from happening, though? So you're saying most or almost none, but like something sort of notable happened a few years ago. And I think there's varying degrees of how people see that.
What it takes is whoever is moving Mitch McConnell's wires needs to be making statements now, as well as other people throughout. The people that Trump vanquished in the Republican Party, the people like Ron DeSantis, the heir apparent, things like that. The adults in the Republican Party need to speak up and often.
I see a nodding head of concern. What's going on in your mind?
Nick's right, but there are no adults in the Republican Party right now. None of them will say anything. Nick and I talked about it last night. The country is frozen right now for the next 9 months. It's Trump, Biden, that's it. And this is a scary, scary time. No Republican's going to speak up to what Nick has just said they should do because of Trump. In that after this election, there's a wonderfully disruptive opportunity for libertarian and freedom lovers to really get into, because there's going to be a real big shakeup politically in this country after the election.
John.
Yeah, there's an opportunity. If you look at the intellectuals leading both sides, both the woke left, and I would say the national conservatives are the intellectuals leading what you guys are calling the right, I'm calling the left. Two aspects of the left.
Just to be clear, just to put this in practical terms, Ron DeSantis to you is a leftist?
Leftist. Yeah, I mean, he's pro-government. He's pro-big government.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ron DeSantis.
No, but he's big government
just mentioned.
from the right.
No.
He's an authoritarian from the right.
Okay, wait, let's just finish, because
If
we're
Ron
not going to
DeSantis
talk
is on the
about
right,
it.
where's Javier Milei? Where is he on the spectrum if Ron DeSantis is on the right? And how do we get a Javier Milei in the U.S. if our spectrum ends at Ron DeSantis? It doesn't make any sense. But the point is, the left and the right offer more than just politics. They're not just saying, hey, vote for me, I'm going to get you this policy. The national conservatives and the wokeists have a complete philosophy that they are offering the people that come to them. That's what people are looking for. Where can I find meaning and purpose in life? How do I live a good life? What is the good and how do I know it? And if the people on the actual right, you people in this room, want to be able to give them a viable alternative, we need to have answers to philosophic questions. It can't just be common sense, oh, of course we're capable of knowledge. Look, we've landed people on the moon. No, if you spent any time in a university, as so many of you have, you know that these sorts of answers don't fly with university professors or the many lookalikes that they're spawning and sending out into the world. So we need to know, how do we know what we know? What is good? And why do individual rights flow from that? And without those answers, we're going to miss this moment.
Well, that is all the time we have as we're approaching the end here. But thank you, everybody, for watching.
Good job.
Thanks.
Good job, boss.
That was very good.
We could have gone on for an hour. That was great.
That would have been fun.